interaction. We want to know what you're hoping to get out of this. And we want to see that in the chat, because it will, again, impact what we do with the next slide and the slide after that. So please take a minute to put into the chat for us why you're here. What made this one seem different? What made you commit an hour and a half of your evening at this time? Because that's not easily done. And please put it in the chat, and we'll kind of give you a second to do that. So go ahead. Thank you, Sherry. Sherry said she's looking how best support a family member with a disability as they get older. Thank you for being brave, Sherry. We appreciate that. Anybody else, please feel free to put in the chat. We'll give it a few more minutes. We're hoping that Sherry's bravery lends you into leaning in to this space, because that's why we're here. Suzanne, thank you so much. Suzanne's son is transitioning to adulthood, and she wants to be as supportive as she can in helping him make that transition. And then Chris said, her son is the age where he's starting to make more decisions for himself, and I want to keep supporting and make sure that professionals do as well. I would like to continue to learn more about how to support the individuals and the families that I work with. Thank you so much, you guys. I appreciate it. I know it's hard to grease those wheels, but it will pay off in spades as we move forward. Thank you so much. I think you're in the right place. I think we're going to be doing exactly that. And we're going to start a little low and slow tonight, but it will move through, and we're excited to share. So we can go ahead to the next slide. All right, so here we go. Participation. This is going to be your first space. It may not be an unfamiliar task. We are going to talk about, and I'm looking at us. Do you think we could do 2 breakout rooms? Or should we just do it in the main room? I feel like a breakout room for this task would be good, but Josh, I'm going to lean to you and see what you think.
Yeah, let's try breakouts. Let's try 2 breakout rooms. We're
going to do 2 breakout rooms. Josh and I will exit if we end up in a room and come back here. We'll leave you guys to do it, but this is going to be 10 minutes. And the expectation and the way that everybody gets something out of this is if your camera's on and mic's on, at the very least mic's on, and if cameras can't be on, I want to respect people's privacy. So knowing that, you're going to spend the next 10 minutes imagining that you are stuck on a desert island. In that process, you're going to take a brief minute to introduce yourself, let them know why you're here. And then you can take as many items as there are people in your group. So it looks like there'll probably be about 3, maybe one group will have 4. So you're allowed to choose 3 or 4 items. We want you to decide what you would take and kind of understand why. Why did you choose? But you have to come to agreement as a group and then come back and share with us that process and what you chose.
What do we do now?
Yep. All right. So what we'd like to do is, again, to have folks unmute. Deb, can you unpin us so they can see each other possibly?
Yeah.
And that way they can see each other. And what we want you to do is have somebody speak for the group and share what it is that you guys talked about, or like what you decided on and how you kind of came to that a little bit.
You know, Josh, I may need you to help me do
unpin.
Yeah.
See what I can do, but let's start hearing from a group. What'd you guys come up with and how?
So go ahead, and one representative for each, or the whole group can talk. I don't care. I see a couple of people unmuted. I see Nancy's unmuted and Sherry and Susan. Do any of you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll just say Nancy's not here.
Oh, it's all right. Would you?
This is I am Rich Lloyd, Nancy's husband. In our group, we basically talked about our children, and we discussed what we would bring on the deserted island. I spoke maybe pictures or whatnot. And I believe, if I'm staying corrected, Tiffany, I believe that's her name was. She said it would be difficult, so that's where we got on that aspect.
Okay. Hard to make the decision, and we at least agreed on photos. Is that safe? Does anybody in his group want to add anything?
Yep, sorry. I have a sick kid here, so
Oh.
I didn't have my video on, but
That's okay.
yeah, we talked about just the pictures of our kids and family, and just he was deployed, so I don't know if we want to share that with the whole
Mhm.
group, but so he said
Yeah. So being on an island is kind of typical in my world. So,
yeah.
so that's so. It's
I said
not-
I can't imagine that.
There you go. There you go. All right. What about the other group? What did you guys come to? Somebody willing to speak for that group?
I can speak. So it was Chris, Suzanne, and I in a group, and we at first, just kind of introduced ourselves and kind of talked about who we were and, who we represented. All parents, part professionals. I think I've watched too many survival shows, so I went for practical. I like the idea of pictures. But I had mentioned like a water purifier, a machete, and something to make fire, because I think we've watched too many of those shows. But I know Suzanne had mentioned music, which actually sounds awesome. So some of the personal things I think would be great, but I think as a group we went with practical items to try to survive and see how we do.
Well, I think if I was on a desert island, I'd like that somebody thought of fire. That was good, or something to make fire. You clearly can't.
And Celia, I don't I
that's
don't
so
think I
funny.
would survive on a deserted island. So I think I've just watched too many TV shows and hope that I bring that and I figure it out.
Too funny. All righty then. All righty. Well, we're going to move forward, but I just wanted you to go, we wanted to kind of step into this, and it will play out into the information we share coming forward next, but just in that idea of making decisions, that uncomfortable space of, what do we pick, right? So go ahead, Josh, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, sure. So, you guys experienced that, actually your experience and your motivations, they affect how you make the decision. And in that particular activity, there wasn't necessarily a right or a wrong answer, right? You had to process through some things and decide what was most important to you based on the information that you were given. So basically what you all just did was make decisions, and we had some fun with it. They weren't like life-changing decisions or anything, but if it had been a more important decision, what about that? Some decisions may not take much time or much thought, and other decisions are going to require a lot of time and a lot of support. So the decisions that we make, big and small, they add up to the type of life that we lead and the people that we are. So when someone makes decisions for us, we can feel like we have no control, and we might even feel frustrated or confused about what we want. So think about your desert island groups. What if someone had just told you what you were bringing? How would that have felt? Now, what if it wasn't a desert island, but medical treatment, or where you were going to live or work? Would you just want to be told those things, right? So when we make decisions for ourselves, we can feel strong and in control, more satisfied with our life, and we may take more responsibility for our life. This is also true for people with a disability. So with that, let's just jump in. And we want to start with self-determination, because it's a pretty important concept for what we're talking about today. Now, there are plenty of like really technical, even scientific sounding definitions for self-determination. That gets overwhelming and, quite frankly, boring really fast. So we're going to focus on what you need to know and try to keep things conversational and practical. So how about this? Self-determination is the ability or power to make decisions for ourselves without any undue influence or interference. And there are three components to it. So first, autonomy. It's just that feeling that we have choice, that we can kind of be intentional about things or take action and actually change something. Like, we don't like the food we're eating, so we're going to stop and get something else or ask for something else. And then competence. So experience that leads to us getting good at something, to feel confident in what we're doing. Now, we don't have to be perfect in order to be competent, but confidence and competence often go hand in hand, because when we feel like we have the skills that we need, we're more likely to take actions that are going to help us achieve our goals. Otherwise, we might be passive or reluctant or just not take any action at all. And then relatedness, just feeling connected to others. Now, in this context, this might mean that we have some relationships with and get some support from people who we trust. So when we have these three things, our motivation can be more internal than external. So what do we mean by that? And why is it important? Well, it means that we can do things because we want to do them, because they're of some value to us, instead of because we feel obligated to do them or because someone else told us we had to. So when we feel like we have some control, like we're capable and good at something, and like we have connections to others who we trust, then we tend to have more self-determination. So great, but how do people actually learn this stuff? How can we help people learn this stuff? Well, we learn best through real-world experience, which inherently involves taking risks and making mistakes and reflecting on the outcomes of our decisions. So these experiences, they help young people learn their strengths and limitations and start thinking about goals. Now, in addition to real-world experience, young people benefit from open, supportive acknowledgement and discussion of their disability. So sometimes families, teachers, and other very well-intentioned people protect youth with disabilities from making mistakes and avoid discussing the details and potential ramifications of their disability. Sometimes we focus instead on only the positive and kind of steer the youth away from many experiences where there is a potential for failure. But in order to direct their own futures, youth need to know themselves and understand how their disability might affect learning, relationships, employment, being involved with their communities, and their needs for support. But here's the thing, young people only learn from failure when they have the opportunity to try the experience again after the failure with a different strategy, a different approach, or a different level of intensity, and then succeed with that. So supporting a young person in becoming self-determined is not about simply removing limits and structure, right? It's instead about providing opportunities so that they can make meaningful decisions about their own future. All right, so why talk about self-determination? Well, beyond the obvious that self-determination and decision-making are closely related, there's actually been a lot of research done on this. And we know quite a bit about the impact that self-determination has on a person's life. We know that people with more self-determination, so more control over their lives and their decisions, they end up having better life outcomes. They live more independently, they have more financial independence, and they tend to have better jobs that pay more. And like all of that sounds good, right? Many of us would be pretty pleased if those things were true for our loved ones when they're adults. But there's actually more, and a whole lot more. People with more self-determination are more likely to be included in their communities, spend time with friends, go on dates, have more privacy, and be able to practice their religion. They're also more likely to just have their rights respected. And then often the most surprising one, people with more self-determination are actually better at identifying and resisting abuse and exploitation. So let's pause and kind of think about that for a moment, because we hear it a lot. It's one of the most common fears that a lot of parents have, that their child in adulthood will be hurt or taken advantage of. Well, it turns out that helping them build self-determination is a good way for them to protect themselves and try to prevent those things. Now, on the other side, we know some things about people who don't get to make their own decisions, or who have less self-determination, like they might not develop decision-making skills at all. They also might not be included in decisions that affect them. as they get older. So think about that: medical decisions, living arrangements, even sometimes things as basic as food and clothing. And over time, people who don't get to make their own decisions, they can become passive and develop low self-esteem, which can affect their physical and mental well-being. So a common term in this field of intellectual and developmental disabilities, and often not a positive one, is learned helplessness. So if we try to make our own decisions, but they're not respected or someone else overrides them, well, we can end up feeling kind of like, well, what's the point? What's the point of even trying? Because it doesn't matter. Someone else is going to make the decision for me. And I'm pretty sure that helplessness is not something that we identify that we want for our loved ones. So we can think about our own lives, maybe at work or within our own family dynamics. Most of us have had that experience where we learned that our voice didn't carry much weight in those circumstances. Now, it's one thing if that's a decision about what food to order for lunch, though that can be a really important decision. Just ask a class of 5th graders. But it's a very different thing if we're talking about things like our health or where we live or who we spend time with and what new things we try. I mean, those are the things that make life what it is, right? So you're going to hear this term a lot: supported decision making. It is not the focus of our sessions, but it is a movement that's been gaining a lot of momentum, and we want you to know what it's about. So here is a pretty common explanation of it. So first, let me get the highlight going. There it is. It's very individualized. So there are as many ways to do this supported decision making as there are people who can use it. So it can even look different for the same person depending on the decision that they're trying to make. But it basically happens when we choose trusted others. So yes, friends and family, neighbors, maybe people like from church or other groups that we're a part of, or other experts or professionals that we trust to help us understand information, options, so that we can make our own decisions. So this really is basically people asking for help from others when they need it to make decisions. And that can sound really simple, right? But our system, the IDD system, hasn't always respected the right of people with disabilities to make their own decisions. So think about it: when you ask for help to make decisions like buying a new car, maybe changing jobs, medical stuff, relationship stuff, you're often seen as wise, mature, responsible, right? Considering your options. But when somebody with a disability needs help to make decisions, it's often seen as a vulnerability, something that we need to protect them from. But just because someone needs help to make some decisions, and we all do sometimes, doesn't mean that they don't have the right to do so. If that was the case, like, I definitely wouldn't have the right to make decisions about my finances. I definitely need help with that, but I still have the right to make those decisions. So supported decision-making is about respecting a person's right to make decisions and supporting them to do so in creative ways, person-centered ways, whatever way they need. Now, sometimes this might be like role playing, other times pros and cons lists, or using pictures or drawings to communicate a person's options to them, whatever's necessary. And those things might not be obvious at first, but when we try, we learn what works and what doesn't for that person. So in supported decision-making, the decision maker, as the term applies, chooses their supporters to help them. And it starts with a decision on their part. Who do I want and trust to help me? The supporters then, you all, help in a variety of ways. But the role of the supporter is not to steer the person towards one decision or the other. Ultimately, the decision maker, as again the name implies, makes the final decision. Now, sometimes at this point, we will hear, "That's great, Josh, but this isn't going to work for my son or daughter because they don't speak or they have intense needs." So we will never pretend to know your child better than you do. But I will offer this perspective from an attorney, actually. She said, anyone who is able to express their desires, what they want, no matter what that looks like. So using words, pictures, gestures, even blinking their eyes or pushing a button of some kind. Anyone who's able to express themselves in some way is able to make at least some decisions. It just becomes our responsibility, the responsibility of supporters, to present information to them in a way they can understand and respond to. I was actually talking to a family very recently who started by telling me that their child needed total care and couldn't make any decisions. But we kind of kept talking. And after just a few more minutes, we realized, oh, he actually does make some decisions. They'd ask him if he wanted to go to Walmart, and he would express yes or no, or they'd give him 2 options of food to choose from. And finally, there are a lot of people, lawyers included, who believe that this right to make decisions, even if the person needs help to do so, is protected by the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So think about it this way. If you're out in public somewhere with someone who uses a wheelchair, and they want to go into a store, but that store, it doesn't have a ramp, would we turn to that person who uses a wheelchair and say, hey, I'm sorry, you don't have the right to go into that store? Well, no, of course not, right? We'd say you need support or accommodations to get into that store. So this is about providing support or accommodations to help people make their own decisions. It's not a right we lose just because we need help to exercise it. Anything you want to add to that, Celia?
I think that as we talk about this, the important thing is this is a growing skill, right? What we have today, any of you came to this room, what we came to with today is different than what they might even know, or be able to do 3-4 years from now. And so I think that open door of helping see where they can and where they can grow, and that dignity of risk that comes with the opportunity to make decisions. And what I loved what you said earlier, Josh, and that idea, and it really was an aha moment for me of letting them go back and do, I did it, it didn't go so well, and making sure that opportunity is presented again so I can have success. And I think, when I look back on my own raising of my daughter, I probably missed that mark a couple of times, and that delayed her confidence in being a decision maker, and kind of is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that really struck me when you said that earlier. I was like, ooh, I got to make note of that one. So.
And that's not specific to people with disabilities.
Yes,
I've
exactly.
certainly had experiences where I made a mistake and that opportunity was taken from me, right? So what does that do to me? Well, now I start getting anxious about making any decisions because I don't want to do something wrong because any opportunity will be taken from me, right? So it has all kinds of impacts. But with that said, you're not going to be perfect. There's no expectation that you'll be perfect. There's also no expectation that your loved one is perfect. We're all going to learn and make mistakes while we do this. It's about then looking forward to the next opportunity and what needs to change to succeed. Okay, so one final analogy that we have found to be pretty useful. It's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? So I'm hoping that most of you remember that show. I sometimes do presentations to like 5th graders and 6th graders, and I've learned that I cannot use this analogy with them because they don't know what the show is. But the basic premise was that the contestant on this show was asked a series of questions. And those questions kind of got harder as they went on, kind of like life. Our decisions, our choices get more complex, more complicated. But what could that contestant do if they weren't sure what to do, or if they didn't know the answer? Well, they had lifelines that they could use. They could call somebody they trusted and ask for help. Or they could ask the audience, hey, I don't know the answer. What do you all think? Or they could get help to narrow down their choices or options. So they weren't choosing from 4, but only choosing from 2 of them. Well, that's really what this is all about. Helping people identify and use their lifelines, helping them learn who and when and how to ask for help when they need it. Those lifelines are important, and we all have them.
So hopefully this is beginning to sound interesting and even doable. So, but how do we do it, right? As family members, as those who support individuals who are decision makers. Remember, there's as many ways to support people to make decisions as there are people who make decisions. It's really person-centered in that way. And person-centered is something that is a value that I hope everybody in this room has at least heard from others that they know in the field. It can look different every time. We can look different. It can look different for the same person depending on the circumstances in different situations. So it doesn't mean that there aren't frameworks or guidelines to use, though, as we go through. So we need to come back to that basic principle that this is about supporting people in whatever way they need to make the decisions that they want to make. So let's look at some of the resources and some ways that we can help people make decisions and build that self-determination and this decision-making skills that we've been talking about. If we get into a habit of introducing these things before the use of being more involved in someone's decision-making, even going so far as to talk about guardianship comes up, that conversation, if we can do it sooner, even better, because then that helps them set the expectation that we should respect people's rights to making their own choices and their own decisions, no matter what end of that spectrum they are on in terms of how that goes. So go ahead. And so it boils down to that person-centered approach and this particular belief that all people have the right to live, love, work, learn, play, and pursue their life aspirations in their community is a core belief of some of the work that I do around Charting the Life Course. But more importantly, it's a civil right. It is a civil right to be able to live in your community with the people that matter to you, doing the things that matter to you and make you happy. And that's really what is at the crux of this whole conversation, right? We want to ensure that we are all participating in a way that is meaningful to us with the people that matter. So I am going to ask you, I know we've kind of gone a period of time and I may have lost your momentum, but I'm going to ask you to undo your microphones again real quick or put in the chat, whatever makes you more comfortable. But looking at that phrase, all people have the right to live, love, work, play, learn, and pursue their life aspirations in their community. And I want you to tell me, which one of those are you willing to put to the wayside for the person or people that brought you to this room? What are you willing to give up? There you go, Chris. None, right? And that really is the point. You know, that little bit of discomfort where you went, what? That's what we're talking about. That's that civil right that we all are here on the planet to do those things and make ourselves happy. And our role as family members or people that are involved in supporting them, that's what we're here to do. And that's really what we want to make sure we're talking about tonight. So go ahead. So that idea of being person-centered. So we've talked about it several times. What does that really mean? That means we're going to focus on the person, right? The person that we're supporting. We've come to this room because we're supporters, right? It's strength-based. We're going to look to their strengths and we're going to make sure that we are talking about what's important to them and not necessarily what's important for them. We can think about that. It's kind of hard not to as a parent. But you've got to remember, important to is what is driving them. Important for is often thrust upon them. It's not that it shouldn't be considered, but important to is what should be at the front of the room, right? It recognizes both abilities and needed support. All of us need support. There's nobody that makes decisions that doesn't lean into somebody else very often. Even on the little things, it supports partnership and that collaboration that we're all into together, that interdependency. It engages ongoing listening and learning and further action. We are never going to be good supporters if we can't listen. It reflects what's possible and not just what's available, right? So we're looking past not what we have on our list of possibility that are comfortable for us, but we're going past that and we're saying, what do you really want? Go ahead. So I want you guys to take a second and put in the chat or unmute. I would love to have a conversation with somebody. What do you see happening here in this picture? Just describe what you think's going on.
Celia, I'd be happy to jump in.
Sure.
I mean, to me, that looks like a person who is out in their community and interacting in their community with others that would be in an inclusive setting.
Great, great. Who wants to add to that? What else might be happening? Stretch your imagination.
Looks like a group of friends.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Going down the road.
just going down the road, just doing their thing. Anybody
Can
want
I-
to?
Can I throw out a question that
Sure,
is
go
kind
ahead.
of on my mind about this picture?
Yeah.
If you had to identify a supporter or supporters in this picture, who would they be?
They're friends.
But specifically in this picture, who would the supporters be?
Two people with them.
With who?
The gentleman in the middle. But that's a good question. It could be the gentleman in the check shirt.
Exactly, right?
Exactly, exactly. We don't know. And that reciprocity is important. And as supporters, we want to make sure that we're engaging and supporting in a way that creates that reciprocity, that connectiveness, and that we're always viewing everyone as someone who supports and who is supported. Thanks for doing that with me. So one of the tools that we talk about in Charting the Life Course is the one-page person-centered description. And this is a tool that Deb has done several things where we use this tool and we talk about this tool. And it is one of the easiest things to use to start thinking in a person-centered way, right? Because what you are going to do is you're going to look at this, anybody you're supporting, with or without a disability, family member or not, and say, what is it that's important to you? And how can I best support you in what you're trying to make happen in your lives? There's nothing that could be healthier for any relationship. And then pointing out and seeing in them their strengths or helping them identify those. And so we utilize this tool. It happens to be a piece of paper, but it doesn't have to be used that way. It can just be the thinking that goes along with those three particular ideas, right? And so I want to take a minute. We actually sent to you ahead of time, I think. Deb, did they get a mailing before? Oh, you're muted.
No, but I'm going to put it in the chat right now.
Okay, that's fine. That's great. So what we want to do is we want to have you take some time. We're going to probably go ahead and put you in breakout rooms again, but you're going to work a little bit on your own. We've got 3 questions. The first of which, hold on one second. I want to be able to get my good eyes going. Hold on one second. Hold on. Why is that not working? Oh, give me
Do
one
you want me
second.
to, do you want me to read them, Celia?
Yeah, it's because my old eyes, Josh, I'm trying to get it bigger.
Hey, listen, I am a willing supporter of you.
Oh, I found it. Woo. Oh, but your fancy slides keep changing it for me. There we go. So the first question is, what strengths do I have that help me make decisions? Right? The second question is, what is important to me when making choices and decisions? And what supports do I need to help me with making choices and decisions? And that can include what supports that work for me and what don't. How do I learn best? What's the best way to encourage me? And what helps me stay motivated, right? So we're kind of thinking a little more deeply. But we want to take a time to have you answer these questions, maybe 2 or 3 things in each imaginary box. Write it on a piece of paper. If you got Post-its in your desk, just, take one Post-it and answer each question. All right. I want the family members in the room to think about it in the context of either you or your whole family, not just your individual who the child or family member who may have brought you to the room, the person with lived experience, but really your family or you, with the intention of sharing it with someone else, either in your family or close to you. All right. And then if you're a professional in this room, I want you to think about it with the intention of sharing it with your supervisor. Right. So as you answer these, I want you to think about if I'm making big decisions at work, if I'm making decisions alongside family members, kind of have that perspective as you write 2 or 3 things that answer each of these questions.
Hey,
All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 5 to 7 minutes to do that. I'm looking at our time. Are we okay to do that? And then we'll send you a note into the chat room that says, okay, now share. And I want you to take the time to share with each other how it would feel to share that with another person that's close to you. Okay. So does anybody have questions? It's a little trickier, and I see people, I want to make sure folks,
we'll have to do that at another one.
yeah. Well, it'll be in throughout the series. Yeah.
So let me see if I get everybody.
Look, they came back.
I think
There we
everybody's
are,
back, right?
people.
It's always a big coup for me. They came back. A small group though. Sherry, I'd call her.
Well, I think everybody's back.
Great. Thank you so much, you guys. I hope you got to talk. I hope you were in groups that there were folks talking. What we'd like to do now, and again, as much as you're willing, cameras on, or at least mics open, what we'd like to do is kind of have you, oh, Josh, I'm jumping into you. So sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No
No, go
problem.
ahead.
So yeah, what we want is we want a few of you to just share something from your one pager, maybe something that surprised you. Let's start there, and then we have a couple other points or questions for you. So just a few people. What's something that you put? What section, and what did you put there?
I said one for question number 1. I said experience. I making decisions. I usually go off of my experience. You somebody who's been in the military for 20 years compared to somebody who's been in the military for 1 year. There's a big gap there, correct?
Yes.
So when making your decisions, who do you really lean on more? So that's how I answered that one.
And that's a great point. We all have people in our lives who have expertise or more experience than we do, and we know to go to those people under certain circumstances for advice or guidance. Great.
And on top of that, when we don't have opportunity to have experiences out of those spaces of fear or safety, we don't have the experiences to rely on and to lean into, and therefore we may be perceived as someone who isn't capable of making decisions. So part of this process of supporting someone to make decisions is the more experiences we have, the more outcomes we have, and the more information we have to lean into when making decisions.
Yeah. Celia, it reminds me of, so I think that common experience that many of us have probably had when you're trying to get your first job. And you hear, well, we want somebody with experience, but how are you going to get your experience until you have your first job, right? You got to have that opportunity to build that experience.
Yeah. And even those of us that want to jump into a new field, it's not even, it might be our 3rd job or our 4th job, but we want to try something new.
Yep.
Yeah. So absolutely. Thank you so much. I would love to be able to call you by name. I want to call you Nancy, but I just don't think that's very common. Nancy's husband.
You say Richard?
Or Rich.
Rich. Perfect. Okay, great. Who else would like to share? Just something you put in there. Oh,
I mean, I can go, Celia.
Yeah.
I mean, Suzanne, feel free.
Okay.
Jump in if I don't say kind of what we talked about. But I mean, it kind of goes with the experience, I'd say, but having information and details, and then kind of like knowing the needs of the person and kind of having timelines and timeframes in order to kind of help with decision making and kind of steer them along. I think we kind of talked about stuff like that. And then also just, us as helping with decision making. I mean, we have valuable information. We know the person the best a lot of the times, but also gathering information from other people in order to help them making decisions. So I don't know. I feel like kind of all over the place, but that's kind of some of the stuff we talked about.
You're allowed to be all over the place. Life is not always neat, right? Life is messy, and sometimes that's where the most fun is. So yeah, when I think about my one pager, under the like how to support me to make decisions, or just in general how to support me, I am a guy who needs help with deadlines and timelines. I just need reminders because I will forget about them. I'll get busy with something else. I know that about myself. I've learned that about myself. I've acknowledged it, and I can talk about it and ask for help, right? Because I know that's what I need. Anybody else?
That's what we were saying, Josh, and what supports do I need is the best way to encourage me is to give me those step-by-step guidelines of you need to make this choice, then this choice, breaking out. Because I know we had to do that with my son with the projects, as by the end of this week, you need to read this far and then this far, and that way to help move along what needs to be done for that project. So that definitely was a support. We had to work with his classroom, and that's how I needed to learn myself how to get things done.
Exactly.
And I think a part of this process is you thinking, what is your own experience like when you look at those? And if you were going to complete this for yourself, I mean, I like Josh, the one thing for me is that I need feedback. And in the last 2 years, you know, we get to these kind of presentations and I ask a question and the answers don't come flooding out. I get really uncomfortable and uneasy because that's what feeds me, right? And so it's those kinds of things, and sitting in that difficult, uncomfortable space and recognizing, you know, when you think about the last time you made a big decision, number one, you likely didn't make it by yourself, and it was a really big decision. You probably went to 3 or 4 different people, at least that's what I do. And you sit in these uncomfortable places wondering about it, and then you think about how people are going to look at you and what they're going to think about you, and there's all this other stuff that comes in. And so if you can take the time to use a tool like this for you, and it's really hard for us as parents to do that, you can send, I can tell you, doing these presentations all the time, I go in and I send, you know, 50 people into a breakout room and say, I want you to fill this out for yourself, and they'll come back and go, my daughter, and they'll, you know, and I encourage you to take this and do it for yourself. Because sitting in that space and understanding the thought process that happened will make you see the person that you're supporting in a really different way, in a really rich way. And hopefully we're going to give you a lot more tools to do things like this with. So go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so I mean, we want you to notice just a few things about this activity, right? Number one, like Celia was saying, it's hard. It's not easy. It doesn't always come naturally. Sometimes we don't even have that level of self-awareness about ourselves to be able to know what support we need. And sometimes we have to ask other people for their perspectives, right? So it's okay that it's hard. It's work, but we can learn and we can grow from it. So a couple of other quick questions for you. Is there anything that when filling this out, and I know you did it briefly, anything that you hadn't thought about for yourself before, something like, oh yeah, I guess I do need that, or even as we've been talking, anything that has occurred to you?
I guess I can say something. When talking about the support section, I was looking at in the work setting, how much support when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, you know, my coworkers and we run things by each other constantly, and we're just such a good support system. You know, when we're trying to serve these individuals the best we can and these families, and you know, we always are bouncing things off of each other, and I just realized how much I need that support, and I believe my coworkers do as well. And it's just great to know that we can do that for each other, with each other.
For sure. And it's sometimes something that we take for granted because we've established these networks, these systems, right? That we're not even aware that we do it on a very regular basis, you know, ask people for help, guidance, support, things like that. So one other quick question. So based on the things we've been talking about here, what do you think would be difficult for the person you're supporting to do, and why? And Celia, clarify for me if you need to, but are we asking them to look at that one pager, and which section would be difficult for the person they're supporting to complete, or something different?
I think it's the idea of going through this process. learning this about the person we're supporting, because I think often, as you had said earlier, sometimes we'll say, oh, my daughter can't, or my son can't. And what, again, I want to go back to when we talked about making it person-centered helps us see possibility, but we're so trained and ingrained as family members to know what they can't do, that, or what we expect it to look like, what success looks like. So therefore that's not what this is, so they can't. And so really thinking about that space, because it would end up being a barrier to even beginning this conversation with a family member or with a person that you're supporting. So what is it that you think that you look at it and you go, oh yeah, this wouldn't work, that's making you kind of go, yeah, nice for them, but not for me, kind of space. Does that make sense? So what is it that would be that difficult spot that you were like, gosh, I'd like to do this, but?
Well, I mean, I can jump in. I feel like the difficult spot for us would be is wanting the individual that we are trying to help with this decision making and supported decision making to want some of this for themselves. You know, I we're kind of in the boat of, I think there is a lot of self-determination coming out of the individual that I'm supporting, but I think there's also a lot of unknown, and therefore sticking with familiarity and just staying with, you know, what they're familiar with. So, well, you know, it's just easier to stay at home. It's easier to live with mom and dad. I don't know what's out there. I don't know what I can do. And so like for us, it's kind of nudging along to show like what they can do and what is out there, and exploring stuff, because otherwise it's oh yeah, no, I'm just comfortable with where things are at. And I think it's more the fear of the unknown and just the unfamiliarity with what are possibilities out there. That would be our kind of, why I would say, I know we can get there, but it is the barrier that comes into my mind. Like, I want them to want it too.
That makes a lot of sense. And, you know, having worked in the field for a very long time, I hear a lot when we talk about new experiences or trying something new. Often we go to the hypothetical worst case scenario. Like, well, if we try this, here are all the bad things that could happen, right?
I'm sorry, but I
Yeah.
think you need to have buy-in also.
Mhm.
All right, you gotta give them buy-in. My 8-year-old has autism, but we give him buy-in. You know, hey buddy, if you do this, this, and this is the type of reward. You can do this, 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 and we have option A, B, and C there. And he has in the past hesitated on trying to pick which one because he thinks it's gonna be wrong. There's no wrong answer. You're young. You're allowed to make decisions that are not right at this time, as long as you do learn from it. And like math, the kid loves math. In the beginning, it's like 4 + 4 is 8, but he kept on. I'm not sure that he would start crying, and I'm like, listen, buddy, you're okay. You don't need to cry. Listen, if you get it wrong, we'll sit here and figure it out together. And then with that is trying to reach and tap into what does he or she need to be able to be taught with. You have to also the mannerisms of what he needs or she needs, the tools. And I'm the wrong person to be talking right now because my wife, God bless her soul, she's been able to tap into that little acorn and be able to pull the information out and then able to share with me. Because when I got back home, there's light years difference because she was able to tap into that for 6 to 8 months I've been gone. So, but yes, I think you really need buy-in. I'm sorry to cut you off, Josh, but
No, you're fine.
the whole decision making decisions is great, but no one's going to make a decision if they don't have the buy-in.
Great point. It's actually, Rich, kind of the other end of what I started talking about. We often look at the hypothetical worst case scenario. How often do we invest time and energy exploring what could go right? What are all the positive things? Kind of like you were saying, if you do this, here are all the positive outcomes that may result from it. So yeah, I think we need to balance those out. Thank you, everybody. All right, so why did we have you do this stuff first in session number 1, right? Well, we learned about supporting people to make decisions in the beginning. We can't be a support to anyone if we can't be person-centered. The hope is that you take this information about how others can support you and use it in supporting others. Celia, I don't know if I cut you off, and this was actually your slide.
No, you're good. You're good.
So,
Yeah.
so then why should we do this? Why is it important? Well, because it leads to people living better lives. And we know this. People who feel like they have control, like they're capable, and who have relationships with people they trust, they just tend to have more self-determination. And the more self-determination they have, the better lives they lead. Lives that probably resemble what we really want for our loved ones anyway. So thank you for taking the time to participate, to listen, to learn, to share. We like to kind of wrap things up by hearing again from you. And not everybody, but tell us something that you liked, that you learned, or that you're concerned about after this first session. And it's an open floor. So anything you want to say, all feedback is welcome. Liked, learned, or concerned about.
I guess I liked learning, like hearing from Sherry that we're all in the same boat, that there are others that are addressing this type of complication of having like the young teen of, getting them to make those decisions and wanting how best we can support them. That's why I'm here.
Thank you, Suzanne. So we're going to ask you to start the round robin and just name somebody else here and ask them. Just call on them and they can share something they liked, learned, or are concerned about.
Okay, Sherry.
I liked just kind of putting some thoughts behind how to help the individual that I'm trying to support with the self-determination. So it's just kind of turn the fire on in me of like, well, how can I help push them further, help them, start advocating more for themselves. I mean, she does a good job with that on certain things, but just kind of trying to propel her forward to try to get her ideas and wants and needs out there, for what she wants in the future.
Yep.
So that was kind of my takeaway.
Great. Who's next? Call on somebody else.
Rich.
What I got, I would say everything is interesting. Interesting meeting you all. Interesting in the aspects of this, the sport and decision making. I feel after speaking with all you guys that my wife and I are actually on a pretty good curve right now, because we have set up and assisting him in making decisions for himself. And I think you build a house from the ground up. So I think it was good to get some we get clarity, and I feel like, and I think we are actually doing right by from what you guys are saying. So thank you for that.
Great. Go ahead and call somebody else, Rich.
Calling you out, Tiffany.
That's okay. Well, I was paired with Rich, so I really appreciated hearing from a parent side of things. Just because I'm usually in trainings and things like this with other professionals. So it was really, really cool to hear a parent side of things and what he's going through and what he's working with and things like that. So I appreciated that.
Great. You know the drill. Who's next?
I don't know. Let's see who hasn't gone. There's a
Sherry,
number.
and Rich have gone.
There's a number, but I don't know who that is.
All right, whomever the number is.
Or the phone numbers. Are you still there? Oh,
All right, try again, Tiffany.
Let's see.
you could pick any one of us.
Is that, oh, okay, good. Let's see. Celia.
Okay, what I liked is that everybody was willing to participate. That's my favorite part. These things are better because of it. I loved hearing the personal touches that make a difference. I love that Tiffany got a perspective from family.